Um, First, a brief history of this book. You know that when Bill wrote it, he had 4.5 years of sobriety, and he did it in about 7 months. But he wrote the whole book, and step 11 was the very last thing he wrote. It was. So he finished it. He was trying to finish by the end of December of 1938, and he wrote How It Works and Into Action in like the last 20 days. So my journey to step 11, it's described more like in how when I meet somebody, what do I do? I go through this process of trying to recreate the same feeling that Bill and Bob had when they were together. All of a sudden, trying to end this, you're fighting this on your own and become a weak, and then I get into this book and we start talking about our allergy and all that stuff. And then we go through Bill's story and we identify with ourselves at the book. And then we get into like step one when we actually look into the eyes of our disease and admit we can't beat it. Step two is when I realized I had to stop fighting everything. I had to actually take myself out of the process and go with the book, because there's parts of it that describe, like, I was having trouble with relationships. I couldn't be of use to others. There was all this, it described me. I was prone to depression and anxiety. And then on the next page it says, is God everything or is God nothing? Is God everything or is God nothing? And I kind of tell they wanted me to say God is everything. And my normal self would have said, I don't know why they want me to do that. But at this time, I was broken enough to say, I'm going to do what this book wants me to go, and I flowed with it. I said, God is everything. And from that point on, everything started to make sense. I started to realize that I'd been selfish and self-centered, not in a way that I wanted to take everything from anyone, but that I thought this whole world revolved around me. On page 70, I saw a description. Bill actually summarizes step 4, that we actually see the fatality and futility of our resentments. Says we have to learn forgiveness, even of the man that we hate. We have to learn understanding and tolerance. And then all of a sudden, I started to feel like I wasn't obsessed. I go to step 9, and this whole thing works so perfectly. But then we get to step 9, we begin an awakening, and how do we keep it? Just how do we keep this thing going? And it says we have to stay in fit spiritual condition. We have to grow in effectiveness and understanding. How do we do that? It's because we have a daily reprieve contingent on our spiritual condition, and we have to realize that. So we actually have to be quick to make amends. But then we come to step 11, and I'm going to admit, the way my first sponsor did that with me, we read through it, and he goes, we just don't really do this. That's how he did it. And that's a lot of men do it that way. Oh yeah. But I had this friend that was all like, no, step 11. She got sober about 28 days after I did. We're still sober. We're going to have 5 years in the next month or two. And she was all, step 11 is the most important step. And she started giving me step 11 books and all this stuff. And I started to realize that once I started to do the 3rd step prayer over and over again, I started to realize God was building something at one point. The only way it could happen is if the bondage of self was gone. And then I could sit in front of rooms and give testimony to his power, his love, and his way of life. But step 11 is a culmination of other steps. But I'm not sure Bill really meant to do that, because he was writing it so fast. He was trying to end this book. He was trying to get it done. But it is what ended up happening is when I looked at step 11, it tells us, upon awakening, plan our day. No, we have calendars to do that, right? It wants us to plan how we're going to be that day. How we're going to be kind. We're going to be loving. How we're going to, because going to the dentist, we know we're going to do that. So plan your day according to what you're going to be like. And then it goes on to explain, which is my favorite part, okay? it goes on to explain. I do this meditation every night. That's a Wayne Dyer meditation that says if you're pure in your motives. He talks about that you are born of the same God that created the valleys, the fields, the meadows, the pastures, the butterflies, the giraffes. He starts to go on to say this ocean, everything is all derived from you. You are the God. Everything, all information is available to you. It swirls in and around you if you only sit quietly. And that's exactly what Bill says when he describes step 11. But if you start to think, it has this little paragraph that's like a disclaimer that says if you start to think that you're aware of what God starts to talk to you in the very beginning, you might pay all kinds of consequences for it. And I'll tell you, okay, my first sponsor, we were driving in his pickup, and he's going to speak at Mayfield. And all of a sudden he stops and he leans over and he looks at me and goes, something's happening to you. And I go, yeah, you think so? And he goes, yeah, something's happening to you. I just want to tell you one thing. And I go, what? He goes, you think God's telling you something? You better run it by me first. Because we can pay it with all kinds of absurd things. But our connection grows and grows, as time goes on. And it's the God consciousness within us. And it tells us to never ask for anything for ourselves. That's the pure motives that Wayne Dyer talks about. That means if you're pure in your motives and you ask this universe anything you want and that you can, and your motives are for helping others, like the answers will come to you, and if you sit still and listen. And it's the same thing that Bill says. And then he continues on to you never pray for yourself, you only pray for others. And then he goes on to my favorite part, when it says, pause when agitated. Because I was just an agitated person, and I could never stop myself. It was like I had a button on the middle of my forehead, and you pushed it, you were going to get the results you wanted, and it was usually going to be me in jail. And is what would happen now the pause when agitated, and actually, but not just pause, but ask yourself, what would God have you do right then? I mean, that messes up everything. Because, it's not just pause when agitated, take a break, then hit the person. It's pause when you're agitated and then ask what God would have you do right now. But then it goes on to the part that I identified with, even though it looks like he just threw it in. You know how much energy this thing saves me? Not that burst of anger that I used to have that would just wear me out. I just don't have it anymore because I don't waste all that energy and all that. I'd be pissed for 2 days over something that happened. I'd still be talking to myself about it in a car, arguing with me. And it was just a waste of effort, because when I now pause, I ask what God would have me do, things get so much simpler. And I'm just going to tell you guys, okay? Today, I had this procedure done on my heart, okay? Because this is how my life has really been, okay? Since I got sober, I was in an accident at work and it tore both my shoulders. And I have 2 hernias from it. And none of the surgeries on my shoulders have worked. They tried 3 times to fix my shoulders. And now they've got authorization to replace my right shoulder. And 10 days before they were going to replace it, I had a stroke. And then they found a hole in my heart. And today they were mapping the hole in my heart. That's why I was on an operating table. They were waking me up at 3:00 today. And I made it here because I pray to God. I pray because I want to do stuff that could help others. I have a connection with God I cannot separate from. People would think that my life is horrible. On paper, it looks really rough, because they're going to have to fix that hole in my heart before I could have my shoulder replaced, before I could have my right hip replaced, before they could fix the hernias. And this has been the best 5 years of my life. Okay? And it's been because I established a conscious connection with God. And that's what keeps me in complete contentment. I don't have a reason to get mad anymore. I don't know. It's like something that when I have it, when it goes away, something disturbs me and it goes away, I'm ready to fix it right away because I've now felt the sunlight of the spirit and I'm not about to give it up. So I will take corrective action in whatever way. I will go to this book and I'll consult it. What do I have to do? Where am I lacking to get that back? And that's that's basically my self-11, you guys. Thank you for listening.